Okay, we're just going to start the session today, just with 10 minutes, I guess, a little introduction about me and just introducing this idea of well-being for practitioners. I was thinking about how to do that. I had a little list, but actually, I think if it's okay, I kind of want to start with an anecdote, which kind of explains how I've got to where we're going to be thinking about what we're going to be thinking about today. So I was in education for 25 years. And I stepped out 5 years ago. And so I had a 5-year gap out of working with young people. And during that 5 years, COVID had happened and the pandemic had happened as well. And I'd worked kind of with young people in charity and third sector 10 years before that, or maybe even 15. So coming back to it really was with open eyes, and I could see immediately stepping into the places where, I should say where I work as well. Let's do that, Neil. Let's actually be slightly professional here. So also, I went from being a teacher. I am a lead coach at the Be Well coaching project, which is based at the Brandon Centre, which some of you may have heard of. There's certainly people on this call that we're working with. Lovely people at Mary's. Hello. That job started 2 years ago, and our kind of remit is to bring well-being coaching to young people and to provide them a place to really take agency for some of the things that they're finding quite difficult, so that it's sort of somewhere between an intervention and a conversation, if you like, and a way to help empower them. And if anyone attended last week's training, they would have met Grace, who's one of our amazing coaches, who will have told you more about the coaching process itself, although I'm happy to take questions about that later as well. And so kind of backtracking, when I finally, this is going to be a terrible thing that's being recorded, when I finally stepped back into a youth club and started going around the hubs, there are a couple of things that really, really struck me. One was the level at which staff are really, really stretched, and just how committed they are to trying to provide the best provision possible. It's the first thing that I noticed. And inevitably, as a result of that necessarily the time that they would want in order to be able to just breathe between either meetings or groups or activities often isn't there. And the young people themselves, like, this is a very personal view, and it's fine if people don't agree with me, and I'm happy to as a coach, other people's, I listen to people. I don't say I'm right, but my reflection about where it got to when I stepped out of education was there were some methods of communication that were kind of being eroded at that time. There were young people's ability to kind of negotiate with each other was being really eroded, partly, I think, if I'm honest, by the school system, just by the crushing level of it. But that's a personal opinion, but also from life online, where things are often very polarized, very, it's this or it's that. So I think the combination of those two things, I'd noticed that before. So stepping back into these youth clubs again, what I was really struck by was just how chaotic the lives of young people seem to be. First of all, how happy they were to kind of be there and to really want to engage with other people, but also on top of that, difficulty of dealing with conflict or negotiating conversations. On top of that, just a really chaotic lifestyle that almost seemed to be like in episodes. Like, there's this bit and there's that bit, and the bits don't quite fit together. And committing to doing stuff seemed a lot harder for young people than I remembered it from before as well. Again, completely understandable. And it occurred to me that the combination of COVID and the uncertainty and the death that happened as a result of that is happening. For them, what that must have done to them as a generation added to that as well, the pandemic itself has really kind of affected our young people. And of course, the response from the government is to give us less money. So it's even harder to do that. So I stepped into all of this, and I kind of wanted from the start our project, which of course is funded for young people, not funded for staff. But my thinking was, if I can't support staff who are going through this, how are they going to help the young people as effectively? So what I've tried to do during the time that our project has been running is to offer some coach training for staff and give some support to staff and work directly with staff when we're working with groups of young people, or just building really strong relationships. And I hope our coaches have been able to do that, because the other thing I was seeing was that there were loads of projects in the borough, but people just tend to kind of drop in and drop out as funding comes and goes, and sustaining something that can kind of be brought into that youth club or that environment for good is harder. So that's kind of where I got to. In terms of tools and stuff, that so that's the gloom bit. It's not just the gloom, because actually, like I say, I have seen some of the most incredible practitioners in the last year and 3/4. I'm so in awe and appreciative of the humor, the compassion, the passion, the love, the care that's shown. So there are a couple of things that I kind of wanted to bring into the mix here. And that is there's a lot of language around self-care at the moment that's constantly being used on LinkedIn, which is where I have to unfortunately spend a lot of my time, but also in everyday language. Same with trauma. The language of trauma has been internalized and used all the time. People say they're triggered a lot of the time. I'm living with PTSD. I know what triggered means. It doesn't mean often what people say that's happening for them. So we've kind of got to this point where there's some level of awareness of our needs emotionally, but that's where it stops. That often it's not, yes, I need to, and I am feeling like this, and I recognize this is going on, but there's a full stop there. There's not so I need to do this bit afterwards. So what I'm inviting, I guess, with the conversation today is not only for me to be able to talk about the kind of tools that I use as a coach. Often it's stuff around mindfulness, it's stuff around reframing. It's kind of taking the us and them element out of lots of what's going on around in the world, and just kind of inviting a different approach. And I've got some ideas around that, if that sounds interesting. And also some really good tips that kind of work for all levels of anxiety or worry. And sleep too, as well, I guess, because I know the hours that often people in the sector are keeping are sporadic or not sociable, or change week to week. So if something around that would also be helpful, I'd be really, really happy to kind of talk about that. I've got the other thing worth mentioning is I'm not a therapist, but I'm psychotherapeutically trained, which is a really hard word to say, especially if you're dyslexic like me. But that's given me some insight into the way that things work as well. So if you've got some questions around that, the good news is there are some easy wins out there that can be used for yourself, and then if you practiced on yourself, you then can use them with young people too. But I guess it's just about, I think the white elephant in the room often I've noticed since the time I've been doing this is that everyone's working really bloody hard, and we just get on with it day by day. And so let's invite the white elephant in, and if we can, talk about the challenges that happen from the system that we're working in, that we have no control over at all. Not in a doom and gloom way, but actually, so what can we do to affect change and look after ourselves better? That's ambitious for that's more than 10 minutes as well, isn't it, Ruth? I did tell you once I start, I can't stop. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there. That's more than enough from me. I hope that's invitation enough to ask some more questions, and not so vague that you didn't get anything from, or so personal that you didn't get anything from it. But you can tell me if that's the case as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Neil. That's brilliant, and I think a really wonderful invitation to start a conversation, which is what we need to do more and more of, isn't it? Like, we're always desperate for conversations like this. So thank you.
No problem.
I'm going to stop recording so that we can have a conversation and be a bit more open with each other.